Recording live. We're live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our next guest, the very talented author John French. John, you're all set to go. I'm going to mute myself, and you have the floor. If you
Okay.
need me, just let me know. I'll have it be listening and keeping an eye on chat.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is John French. I am a retired crime scene investigator, also an author and editor. I will be reading you stories until Pat Thomas comes along and kicks me off. My first story is called Saving Marley, and it is from the book Patrick and I wrote together, The Santa Heist. It is a collection of stories, one of which Pat and I wrote together. The rest are stories either I wrote or Patrick wrote. The story I am reading, as I said, is called Saving Marley. For all you listening, this story is rated PG for some suggestive conversation. I chose this story because Kevin is our host, and it is a ghost story. If you know Kevin, you know that he likes ghosts. All right. Saving Marley by John L. French. This is the first entry in a series of journals kept by the late Mrs. Ebenezer Scrooge. The diaries were in the possession of the Charing Cross Bank and were discovered by a group of self-styled irregulars during an unsuccessful search for a tin dispatch box said to contain the papers of one John H. Watson. My father had gone to the exchange and would be out for the rest of the day. That was the opportunity for which I had been waiting. Setting aside my ledger, I left my clerk's desk and went into the chambers of Ebenezer Scrooge. "Yes, Martha, what is it?" he asked with his ever-present smile. It was a smile that had fooled many people, mostly his business competitors. Following the events related in Mr. Dickens' A Christmas Carol, the man I had come to know as Uncle Ebenezer underwent a complete change of personality. Where before Ebenezer Scrooge was a bitter miser who had not a kind word for anyone and who worshipped only the god of avarice, after the Christmas of 1843, he became a generous man who cared deeply for the welfare of his fellow human beings. This sudden transformation led many to believe that he had taken leave of some, if not most, of his senses. While it is possible that he had, in some way, he certainly did not lose his business sense, nor his memory of what it had been like before the ghost. He still knew every trick of business and finance. No doubt he had thought up many of them. So he was not easily fooled by those who sought to take advantage of what they perceived as a newly born weakness. He would hear their proposals, smile, then allow them to stumble into the pitfalls of their own greed. He liked to say that both sides benefited by such transactions, he financially, and the other side in the gaining of experience. In spite of, or perhaps because of, his new attitudes, Uncle's business prospered to the point where he offered my father Robert a partnership. "That's most generous of you, Mr. Scrooge." "Well, Bob, it's not generosity at all. As a partner in the firm of Scrooge and Cratchit, you will be paid only if we profit, and part of your payment will go back into the firm itself. Plus, I will be able to hire a new clerk at a much lower salary than I am currently paying you." My father was quick to agree, and so the firm of Scrooge and Marley became Scrooge and Cratchit. And in keeping with tradition, either man would answer to either name when a new customer came. And this is where I come in, dear journal. With my father now a partner, the firm needed a new clerk. I had always been good at mathematics. My millinery apprenticeship was close to being complete, but I did not find the work challenging. So when at dinner my father spoke of needing to hire a new clerk, I went straight away to Uncle. No, journal, I did not speak of this to my father. I loved him dearly, but he had strict views on a woman's role in the world, and it was not in the workplace. Instead, I went to the firm where I knew my father when I knew my father would be out, and laid my case in front of Uncle. His first response was a look of puzzlement. But this was a man who had traveled with ghosts both forward and backward in time, and so was more open than most to new and different things. Finally, he chuckled. "A female clock," he said more to himself than me. "That would set them talking. Just more evidence that I'm a befuddled old man. They'll think it a humbug. More fools they. With that, he handed me a disordered pile of receipts and bills. Make sense of these, Martha, and we'll see. Use your father's old desk. It was 2 hours before I presented my ledger to Uncle. He scrutinized them carefully, adding the figures in his head and speaking to himself in a whisper too low for me to make out. Finally, he closed the ledger and said, "I'll pay you 1/3 of your father's current salary." 2/3, I bargained. Uncle smiled. He was skilled in many games, but this was his favorite. 45%, and I'll tell your father that hiring you was my idea. 50%, and I'll tell him it was mine as soon as he recovers from seeing me sitting at the clock's bench. As I expected, my father was shocked and clearly did not approve. But he knew that I was my mother's daughter, and since he won very few arguments with her, he knew that he had little chance against me, especially not with Uncle sitting back and chuckling at his loss of composure. Finally, Father nodded agreement. Then he said, if nothing else, we'll have people come to do business, if only to see a female clerk." "My thoughts exactly, Bob," Uncle said. "My thoughts exactly." At this time, I was approaching an age at which society would consider me a spinster. It was not that I did not wish to marry and bear children. It was just that most men close to my age did not attract me. I attracted them, however, and had several pay court to me. There were some with whom I may have made a suitable match. There was always something lacking in me. There were even a few who came calling after I entered employment with Scrooge and Cratchit. However, they made it clear that they did not approve of my being in business and expected me to give up my life in order to serve theirs. That would not do. Only Uncle and, in a lesser way, my father seemed to support me. "Do what you want to do in life, my dear," Uncle told me after one young man no longer came by at closing to escort me home. "I always did, and look how I turned out. A cranky old man who had to be saved by ghosts." "I'm not that old," Uncle said with a smile, "and I still do what I want. I just want different things, that's all." There was something wistful in his reply, as if he had not done all that he wanted. That may have been when I began to notice a change in my feelings toward the man I called Uncle. I came to realize that he was not an unattractive man, nor is he as old as Mr. Dickens made him out to be. He was intelligent, kind, generous, usually in good humor, a good businessman, and well situated in life. I also noticed that there were times that he would look at me in a way that was less than avuncular, and more like a man looking at a woman. For all his kindness and good humor, Ebenezer Scrooge was a proper gentleman. He would never seek to press his advantage with a lady, and he would never even consider suggesting what I was thinking he might be. So it is, Journal, that I finally come to the place where I started. Smiling Ebenezer Scrooge asking, "Yes, Martha, what is it?" Sitting down in front of his desk, I drew up my courage and said, "Uncle Ebenezer, have you ever considered marriage?" Uncle was hardly ever surprised, but that day he was. After taking a minute, he replied, "That is not a question a young lady should ask of an older gentleman, or a clerk should ask of her employer. I have my reasons, and so I ask it." As I wrote above, Journal, Uncle was intelligent, and I believe that he quickly discerned my reason for asking. At that point, he could have told me to return to my work, thus ending our conversation, sparing us embarrassment, and allowing us both to go on as we had been. Instead, he answered, "In my youth, I considered. Her name was Belle. She ended our relationship for good reason. That I saw now romance and marriage as well a humbug. It's only been in this past year that I have thought otherwise. But who would have? I have almost the same question, but mine is, who would I have? The answer is, none who would so far have me. I do not want the young men who have pursued. I need someone more mature, who would see me not as a wife to a husband, but as a partner in life, home, and business." He thought for a moment, then, "Martha, is there something you wish to ask me? Should you not be asking me?" "I want to, but dare not. So it falls to you, my dear. His "my dear" was said with a different inflection than usual, and so, Ebenezer Scrooge, I would have you for my husband if you would have me for your wife. I reached out my hand to him. In answer, he reached out and took mine in his. I think, my dear, that you should start calling me Ebenezer. And so I did. So from now on in these pages I shall. There was the expected talk that I married him for his money. He married me for my youth. That Ebenezer married his partner's daughter was not remarked upon. Many assumed that I was the price of my father's partnership. More were shocked by Ebenezer marrying an employee. The more vocal of those who would find scandal almost caused Ebenezer's older, darker self to emerge. While my heart thrilled that he would wreak vengeance on those who cast vile aspersions on me, I would not let him fall back into his old ways. I convinced him that instead of ruining them, it would be better if he simply demonstrated that he could do so when and if he wished. Fear is a great advantage in business. We married in the fall of the year. By that time, I had spent some of my fiance's money in making the dingy rooms that had been Jacob Marley's into a livable place for husband and wife. In time, when there was a child to consider, we would move into a larger home. But for now, this was suffice. From the start, our marriage was a happy one. In the counting house, I was his clerk. At home, I was his wife. In every way. Forgive me, Journal, if I am blunt, but Ebenezer and I both took delight in the physical aspect of marriage. It was new to both of us, and Ebenezer proved to be ardent in his affections, which boded well for the prospect of children. It was Christmas time, a week before the day. It was evening, and we were in bed. The clock had just tolled 11 when Ebenezer said, "This time of year I often think of how Jacob Marley came into these quarters and told me of the three ghosts. It was a good thing that he did, Ebenezer, for if he had not, we would not be together this night." "Yes, it was," he said, in a low, thoughtful voice. "Why so sad, husband? In 7 days it will be Christmas, and the only spirits will be those who we raise ourselves." "It's just that, well, Jacob saved me. Do not know at what cost, but he saved me. Every year since then I've wished that I could save him. I know not how, or even if we could. I, too, have wondered about Marley. By all reports in life, he was a harder man than my husband had been. Why then in death had he reached out to save his partner when he could have left him to die alone and suffer for eternity? Misery, it is said, loves company. We could at least try, I said, but I think we'll need a ghost." Forgive me, please, that was Big Ben. Ebenezer was quiet for a while. Of all people, he was the last to deny the existence of spirits. "It's not as if I summoned them or even wanted them. It was all Jacob's doing, so I believed. It could be that he was being used by a higher power. If so, perhaps he has already received his reward." As I was about to point out to him that it sounded as if he was arguing against his own suggestion, he went on, "Still, we have to try. It would not do for him to burst in on us and rattle his chains at an inopportune moment. That, my mother has implied, is what children do." "Really? Then in the tiny house in which your family dwelled, it's a wonder she had so many." To this I replied, "According to my mother, that is what go outside and play is for. We'll have to remember that. We won't have to, Ebenezer. When we have children, we'll have a large house with many rooms and much privacy and servants to help ensure it." Servants. Ah. Ebenezer closed his eyes and alternately nodded and shook his head. I had seen him like that before, when he was trying to remember something. Finally, "My dear Martha, that terrible spectre showed me my short, miserable future. There were servants, my servants, I now realize, haggling over my possessions. That might be the answer. But I won't know till tonight, till tomorrow. For now, please lower the light." "But Ebenezer, I'm not tired." "Neither am I, my dear." "Oh, good. The next morning, we let my father open the office while we waited for our charwoman to arrive. Is there a problem, Mr. Scrooge, Mrs. Scrooge? No problem, Mrs. Dilber. But a question. If someone were to break in and steal, say, our bed curtains, rings and all, where would he go to sell them? Mrs. Dilber looked at my husband as if he had accused her of something, and in a way he had. I'm sure I don't know, Mr. Scrooge. Rest assured, Mrs. Dilber. My wife and I have no doubts about your honesty, but I'm sure you hear things. I merely have questions to which I need answers. I would make it worth your time and trouble, especially if I learn what I need to by tonight. Mrs. Dilber thought for a moment, no doubt about how generous her employee had been, and might be if she gave him the name he was seeking. A name I guessed before she said it. You might want to talk to old Joe. Ebenezer smiled. He knew the name because he had heard it before and had seen the man to whom it belonged. The ghost of Christmas yet to come had shown him. Very good, Mrs. Dilber. It will be to the advantage of you both if I find him. Where might that be? Mrs. Dilber's direction led us to a rundown beetling shop in an obscure part of London. Yes, Journal, I wrote us. Over Ebenezer's objections, I prepared myself and accompanied him. As astute as he was in business, he was a stranger to the world we were entering. Not that this world was familiar to me, but growing up in Camden Town did teach me a few things. Whether he knew it or not, my husband needed me, and so I would go. I did not think it possible that old Joe's shop was worse than Mr. Dickens had described. In addition to the receiving of goods of dubious provenance, there were indications that other crimes, darker, more serious crimes, were plotted and carried out. While there, the name Bill Sykes was mentioned more than once. And there was a boy who called himself the Dodger, who looked at me with a leer that he was much too young. Ebenezer walked into the shop as if he owned it. He may have. My husband has real estate holdings all over London, and this may have been one of them. Old Joe looked up as we entered. I know you, he said with a nearly toothless grin. You're the one what's seen the ghost. You're Scrooge. Who is this pretty? Your daughter or your doxy? That remark got a general laugh from those. It almost got old Joe a caning from Ebenezer. But before my husband's chivalry caused more trouble than we could handle, I said, I am Mrs. Scrooge, and we've come for information. We are prepared to pay for it. Old Joe eyed us up and down. I could tell he was calculating the worth of our clothing and estimating how much money we might be carrying on our persons. He was weighing this against the risk at what peril our disappearance might have for him. What's to stop me from taking the money you are going to pay, plus whatever else you're holding? Doing for Mr. Scrooge here and putting you to, well, let us say work. There came the sound of a metal blade shining out of its wooden sheath. Then the point of Ebenezer's sword was against old Joe's throat. And what's to stop me from running this through your neck and asking my questions elsewhere? Before old Joe could answer, difficult, with a blade at your neck, there was a sound behind us. I produced a small pistol from my muff. Tell the man in back of us that if he takes one more step, I will shoot him and then you. The sound will, of course, summon the two peelers who are waiting outside. I ain't seen no peelers, the one called Dodger said. They are very good peelers, Ebenezer replied. Now then, let us stop this nonsense and get down to business. £50 for the name of a reliable spiritualist. I thought you was already familiar with spooks. I wish to become more familiar with them. £2. One, and I'll not tell the peelers about Mr. Sykes being here. Done and done. Old Joe gave us a name. Hagar. She and her tribe run a parlor down the street. Bill there uses her when he plans a job. She's what you said, reliable. She had better be. It'd be a shame to have to buy this building only to tear it down. Hagar was a daughter of Roman. The parlor specialized in the telling of fortunes. On the way there, Ebenezer said, I don't see any peelers. As you said, they are very good peelers. I didn't know you carried a sword cane. Then we're even. I didn't know you carried a gun. My mother taught me that a lady always dresses for the occasion. Mother is a smart woman. Her daughter is as well. Hagar's parlor was in the rear of a pawn shop. Those in need of Hagar's advice were to look toward the door to the back room. The broker would then nod his permission to go back. This Ebenezer and I did, and were soon admitted. Mr. and Mrs. Scrooge, I bid you welcome. Hagar was a young woman dressed and made up to look older. Her voice, however disguised, lacked the timbre of someone of experience. Her greeting before we could introduce us would have been impressive had I not seen Dodgers slip out of old Joe's ahead of us. How may I help you? Hagar asked from behind a table. Strangely painted cards in a glass globe were before her. A look into your past lives to see how they influenced your present? Or perhaps a glimpse into what the future may hold? I once saw the future, Ebenezer said in a tone that was almost a growl. It was bleak and depressing, and hid in a lonely, untended grave. Hagar smiled. So I have read, Mr. Scrooge, so I have read. But if you do not want to view your past lives, and have no desire to see what your future ones might be like, then how can I help you? We seek to summon a ghost, I told her. Hagar looked at Ebenezer in disbelief. 3 were not enough? There were 4, actually, if one considers Jacob Marley. And which do you seek? The past is gone, the present has changed, and what is yet to come may be predicted, but is by no means assured. Thank heavens for that, my husband whispered sotto voce. Ebenezer and I had discussed this and had come to what we hoped was the right decision. We seek to summon the ghost of this Christmas, he said. Hagar's hand reached under the table, and when it emerged, it held a thin candle, one white with streaks of green. She handed to us, along with a package of herbs. Burn this on the eve, close to but not quite midnight. Scatter the sage to purify the room. But, Mr. and Mrs. Scrooge, take care. For many find what they seek, only to discover that it is not what they desired. Be sure that your game is worth the candle. We smiled at this bit of wordplay, and Ebenezer asked, Speaking of worth, may we leave an offering? For the candle, nothing. The authorities take a dim view of profiting from magic and witchcraft. For the sage, what's good for the receiver is doubly good for the giver. Ebenezer laid 2 crowns on the table. There'll be another if this all works out. Then I shall pray to God and sing to Jesus for your success and safety. On Christmas Eve, we closed early. I suppose you'll want all day tomorrow? Ebenezer asked my father with a merry twinkle in his eye. If quite convenient, sir. Ebenezer put on a false scowl and said, And be here all the earlier the next morning, or I'll report you to my partner. We made plans to meet at my parents' house the next day, then we went home. We had dinner, took a brief nap, and prepared for the night's activities. 11:30 found us in front of a low fire. Scrooge was sitting in the chair in which he had first seen Marley's ghost. I was in the chair that his ghost had used. The candle that we had received from Hagar was on a table between us. We had agreed that when the clock chimed the 3/4 hour, he would light the candle. The clock chimed. The candle was lit. We waited. The clock struck midnight. On the 12th stroke, there was nothing. I do not know what Ebenezer was thinking, but I was becoming convinced that Hagar had played us for fools. Then came a light so bright that it blinded us. When our eyesight returned in a minute or 2, we were not alone. There before us stood a vision of a woman. Her gown was green and trimmed with white fur. She was crowned with a holly wreath and held a wooden staff in her hand. She was large, standing 6 foot at least and possibly closer to 7. Her body was perfectly proportioned for her size, and I know that Ebenezer found her beautiful, for so did I. She smiled at us, then spoke, her voice like a hymn in church. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. Ebenezer, despite his past experiences with the spirit world, seemed overawed. When he could speak, he said, Spirit, you seem different from the last time we spoke. There came from the ghost musical laughter that could not help but bring joy and reassurance to our souls. That was my brother you met, Ebenezer. You have never seen the like of me before. Now then, why summon me on this most holy of days? My husband, having recovered from his surprise, said, If you please, we seek Jacob Marley. Without hesitation, the ghost replied, the one you seek, the one who in life was your partner, no longer walks this earth. Instead he is a specter, doomed to carry the weight of his sins forever, as must every man and woman. Your sins, your burden, Ebenezer, have these last few years been greatly reduced. I wanted to ask about my own burden, but however innocent I believed myself, I was afraid to. Before I could gather my courage, Ebenezer said, thank you for that, Spirit. But if it has been, it is because of what Jacob did for me. We would repay him if we could, but we know not how. You cannot, Christmas Present said with some finality. Although his burden was somewhat lightened by his kindness to you, his only friend, this kindness did not outweigh his many sins, and so he must wander. Must he, Spirit? I asked. Does hope and repentance belong only to this world? Can there be no redemption in the next? The ghost was silent for a moment and waved her staff. The window flew open, and from outside there came the mournful sounds of condemned spirits flying in the night, dragging the weight of their chains. Would you have me save them all? She asked. No? Why then this man? Because, said Ebenezer, without hope of being redeemed, he saved me from his own fate. My life is better because of him. Many lives are better. I owe him a debt. Taking my husband's hand, I added, we owe him a debt. The ghost nodded as if this were the correct answer. How then shall we accomplish this? The ghost of Christmas past showed me my past life and how it led to my sorry state. Could it do the same for Jacob? To what end? The ghost asked. Jacob Marley has only the past. He has no future, and his present is one of suffering. And consider this, Ebenezer and Martha Scrooge. If by going into his past it was possible to change Jacob Marley for the better, he may not have become your partner. He might not have been damned, and so there would have been no one to argue for your redemption. Change Marley's past, and you lose your present. The ghost turned to me. Your future would hold nothing but bitter spinsterhood, caring for your aged parents who forever mourn the loss of your brother Tim. And you, Ebenezer, your future would again be a lonely death, an unattended grave, and suffering in the long, dark night of damnation. The ghost then pointedly looked at the candle. It had forgive me all, but that we are in London, and that was Big Ben again. The ghost then pointedly looked at the candle. It had mostly burned down. My time here is short. When the flame goes out, I will be gone. Is there anything else? The way she asked this suggested that there was, but it was something that she could not reveal unless we asked. There had to be an answer, but I could not think of it. I looked at the candle, saw it burning down. Candle, the one that Hagar had given us. I recalled her words about past and future lives. Mindful of the very short time we had left, I quickly asked, I have heard that we have both past and future lives. If so, could not the soul of Jacob Marley be reborn to a new life, and so be given a second chance at redemption? Candle sputtered. The ghost again smiled and nodded. Are you offering what I believe you are offering? I am. Then so be it. When the time comes, the soul of Jacob Marley will be in your care and will no longer be doomed to the long, dark night. Candle sputtered a third time and went out. Our fire went out with it. In the darkness, Ebenezer said, I may have missed something, but I believe we, or rather you, saved Jacob. But how? I will explain later, my love. For now, you should know that at night you and I will be very busy in a most enjoyable way. The year came and went. Soon it was Christmas time. My brother Timothy, no longer Tim, or worse, Tiny Tim, suffered the attentions of my husband and father as their new clerk in training. I was spending my time at home, working when I could on old records from Scrooge and Marley, but mostly taking care of our 3-month-old son. It was Christmas Eve, and Ebenezer would soon be home. I had the fire lit and was sitting in front of it, in the same chair in which Jacob Marley had once sat, and was now shared by myself and his namesake, Jacob Marley Scrooge. As I held him in one arm, I began to read to him the book in my free hand, the book I planned to read him every Christmas Eve. Marley was dead. To begin with, I began, but knew in my own heart that there was no doubt whatsoever that his soul lived again and was in my care. That ends Saving Marley. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope Charles Dickens will forgive me. Now, since we still have time, I would like to read to you another Christmas story. This one from my character, the Nightmare. Um, the Nightmare is a cloaked vigilante in the style of the Spider and the Shadow. He is their contemporary, and his adventures appear in mostly in The Nightmare Strikes, published by Padwolf Publishing. The story is called Unto Us. It's the story of the Nightmare. Christmas Eve. The snow falling outside Marin's, covering Manhattan in a blanket that hid the city's many and various sins. Most of the island's inhabitants, citizens, cops, and crooks, were inside. The accumulation was promised to be deep, the winds harsh, and the temperature below freezing. Inside Marin's were a select few who, at the owner's request, chanced to storm to get there and would brave it getting home. They were gathered around a center table. There was Michael Shaw, who on other days was called the Nightmare, a shadowy character who punished those who invaded the law. There was Dana Easton, whose career as Black Velvet was unknown to her police lieutenant father. There was Ellen Patrick, visiting from the West Coast. Better known as the Domino Lady, that night she had foregone her usual black and white in favor of red. More festive, she explained. Well, Seamus were here, Shaw addressed his host, whom he knew to be of the gentry of Erie, the mythic part of Ireland. But so important that you would call us out on this of all nights, and in the snow yet. It is because of this night that I dared call you, Seamus Moran said from his built-up chair, designed so that the small man would be on a level with his guest. And I thank you for coming. You're the only ones I can ask of this. Dana, what of your parents? The young girl, a dark beauty of slender build who was almost out of her teens, smiled. My father's working the holiday as he always does. Most of the Jewish cops do, so their fellow officers can spend time with their families. And your mother? Asked Ellen, who, despite being not that much older than Dana, thought her far too young for the dangerous adventure of being a vigilante, and felt that Michael Shaw should not be encouraging the girl. My mother believes that I am nestled snug in my bed with visions of sugar plums and all that. She won't check on me until morning. By which time you will be safely under the covers, no matter what happens, promised Seamus. Time tonight flows differently from all those with good hearts and goodwill. Now, as to why you're here and not home with your loved ones. He then explained what was going to happen, who was to come, and what he was to do. When he finished, the others sat in stunned silence. Dana was the first to speak. You can't be serious. He assured her he was. That's terrible. It is. It is unlike you, Seamus. Shaw said in a measured tone that came very close to the one he used as the Nightmare. I assume you have a reason. The small man nodded slowly. As it was, so it must be. Ever since he ascended. The world does not forget what happened over 100 years ago, and so its spirit plays out the drama again and again, year after year. This year it falls to this city, this far, to those gathered inside it and to others like us. Were I to try to change it, well, others have tried. They could not. Neither will I. And you want us to what? Change it for you? To stop you from doing what you must? Seamus shook his head. Would it were that simple, Michael. But no, I will play out my part, then you must play yours. As Seamus was telling them what that would be, there was a knock at the door. Before the table went silent. The knock was repeated, a hard knock that somehow conveyed a desperate need. Then quiet. Maybe, some at the table thought, they've given up, gone away. But no, there was the knock again. Just as desperate, but somewhat weaker. 3 is the number, Amos said, leaving his chair and going to the door. Unbarring it and throwing the latch, he opened it up just enough to look out, to see what he expected to see. Man and woman, both poorly dressed for the weather. His arm was around his wife, whose belly was large with child. Please, the man begged, can you come in? It's cold. We're cold, and my wife, it's almost her time. Seamus hardened his heart and shook his head. I'm sorry, we're closed. Then, because it was required of him, said, there's no room. And he slammed the door. Through his pain, he began to give orders. Coats on, everyone. Now is your time. You know what you must do. Protect them, but as yourselves. No masks or guns tonight, and only joyous laughter once the deed is done. And once they're safe. Your jobs are done, Dana. They will be in other hands. And the child will be another chance to make things right. Now go, all of you, and may he be with you all. As the couple trudged through the now ankle-deep snow, despairing of ever finding a warm, safe place, there came into view a small, dark figure waving both arms. Once it had their attention, it made a follow-me gesture and set off slowly through the snow. There's a vacant garage some blocks from here, Amos told Dana Easton, giving her directions. Shepherd them there. See them safely inside. Shaw and Ellen had their own assignments. They were to guard the couple and the girl, to protect them from the predators who would prey upon the weak, lost, and helpless. Going ahead of Dana, Shaw stopped 2 men who would have waylaid the child. They ran off bruised and bleeding, but he would remember their faces. And one day the nightmare would deal with them. Likewise, Ellen, following the couple, took the knife away from a man who would have robbed them of what little they had. As he seemed every bit as desperate as they, Ellen sent him away without injury, and without his knife, and directed him back to Moran's. He was one they could shelter then. Shaw and Ellen caught up to Dana as she returned. They're safe inside, said the shivering girl. She had given the woman her coat. Seamus didn't say not to. Their job's done. The 3 shepherds returned to Moran's for a warming drink before going home. Sometime later, a uniformed officer who was normally a plain-clothes lieutenant heard a noise coming from a vacant garage that was on his beat for that night. Thinking, at least it's inside and out of this weather, he stepped in, hoping to find a burglar he could take to the station where there was warmth and hot coffee. Instead, he found a young couple. The woman was obviously in labor and distress. The man was discovering that sometimes love was not enough in circumstances like this. Well, the officer thought, it won't be the first baby. As he set himself to his task, Lieutenant Jerome Easton felt the cold garage warm up. From somewhere he heard the sound of singing and rejoicing. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. Isaiah 9:6. And that is the end of that story. I hope you liked it. We still have some time, so you'll have to suffer a couple more. Kevin.
Hey, John. I've read both of the stories. They're wonderful stories. You read them very well. I think we've also, looking at the chat, you've got some new fans.
Oh, good. For my new fans, those 2 stories came from the Santa Heist by Don French and Patrick Thomas. It is published by Bold Venture Press. Can be found on both found on Amazon, both in trade paperback and on Kindle. Or you could make the people at Bold Venture Press very happy by finding their website and ordering direct from them. just to give them another plug and need sort of a plug, their latest publication is Zorro. Is a Zorro anthology called Zorro: The Daring Escapades. I have a story in there, and it tells of Zorro and the Pulp Fiction version of Sergeant Garcia teaming up to solve a murder. I have a couple.
What was the name
Pardon?
of that book? What was the
Zorro:
name?
The Daring Escapades.
Okay, because I'm putting links to the Amazon pages for all of these books in the description for people as well.
The paperback is there's also a hardcover which you can get from direct from Bold Venture Press. The paperback contains illustrations for each story. I was given the honor of having the first story, and the cover illustration is from that story. I would read it. I would have read part of it to you, but all copyrights, trademarks, etc., belong to Zorro Productions Incorporated and not to me.
Fair enough. We don't want to step on toes with that.
No, we do not want Zorro coming after me. I would look bad with a Z on my forehead. Which Zorro used to do. Zorro used to do that to people on the pulse, not on the forehead, but he would mark their cheeks with a Z, sort of like the Phantom did with his ring. Then everybody knew that this person had run afoul of Zorro. If he faced somebody with a Z, well, the sword went somewhere else.
Let's see. There we go. Yeah, definitely with you, Patrick, and of course Dacre. I plan on putting links to your books in the description so that people can go buy them.
Okay. If you search for me on Amazon, please search for John L. French and include the title of one of my books, because when you search for John L. French, you tend to get books that are actually in French or about France.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Yeah, so that doesn't. I don't know if Patrick Thomas has or anyone else has that same problem, but I definitely have that problem.
When looking up books for Pat, I found books on Patrick Henry, for example.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, reading, if you Amazon and actually Google will do this too. You can punch in a topic, search for it, and go along, and soon it becomes a game of that old game Telegraph.
Oh,
Or by
yes.
the time you get to about the third page, you're looking at something that has absolutely nothing to do with the topic you searched.
Virgo, who you met earlier, wanted to say that she thought very nice reading.
Thank you. Yeah, the story behind Saving Marley. We're still in London. That's Big Ben.
John?
Yeah, I'm still here. I was waiting for Big Ben to stop striking. Okay. The story behind Saving Marley was when Pat and I were writing the stories for the Santa heist. I had a couple already written, and so did Pat. But 3 or 4 stories just doesn't make a book. So we were trying to I came up with a story about a Roman soldier at the time of the Nativity winding up helping the Holy Family. I had a story about a guardian angel, about the Christ child's guardian angel. I had one in which somebody gets all he wants for Christmas and it doesn't work out that well. Things like that. Also, you'll like this, Kevin, a new Bianca Jones story, which references the Nightmare and brings back, if you've read the Nightmare, you'll remember the Phoenix. It actually brings back the Phoenix. So I got the idea of teaming Sherlock Holmes with Ebenezer Scrooge, and Scrooge was, I don't know what it was Scrooge was going to ask of Holmes, either find the ghost or maybe somebody was stealing from his shop or something like that. Then I checked the timeline. Sherlock Holmes was not alive when Ebenezer Scrooge, when the events of a Christmas Carol took place. Then really? I thought, pardon?
I said, really? I was surprised.
Really, Christmas Carol takes place approximately 1843.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and I've read stories about Holmes teaming with Scrooge, and I'm sure nobody would object to it, but I kind of like to stick to the Holmes chronology that was laid out in Sherlock Holmes at Baker Street. So I couldn't do that. And then I thought of an older Mrs. Ebenezer Scrooge hiring Holmes to do something. Maybe the ghosts were back. And then I'm thinking, well, why don't I just leave Holmes out of it and write a Mr. and Mrs. Ebenezer Scrooge story? What would they do? Well, maybe they would. And then I decided they would want to save Marley. I did give a nod to Sherlock Holmes about the Baker Street, the irregulars looking,
Mhm.
in the tin dispatch box in the Charing Cross Bank. But that was about it.
I know, it's a wonderful story. Well, as you know, and I think my listeners know, I'm a definite fan, being Christian, of the whole redemption motif. And I've noticed you've used that a couple of times in your stories, and it's one of the things I like about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of the Bianca Jones book, Here There Be Monsters, is there is a major redemption at the end.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be I've got plans for the third Bianca book, The Last Monster, which should tell you something, and
Yeah.
I have plans for a redemption in that book. So if you've read The Magic of Simon Tombs, you know that one of the characters in there is on the road to redemption.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, speaking of the Santa heist, there is a Simon Tombs story in there too. And again, it's Christmas. There's redemption.
Yeah, it's a big theme with Christmas for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and so it's a little bit of those two stories were a little bit of Christmas in June.
Well, mid-May at the moment, but
Mid-May, yes. It feels like I've been stuck inside so long. It feels like June.
I've kind of lost track of what month it is.
Yeah.
I just know because I can look on my computer and go, "Oh, it's May."
Evan, you have my email address, right?
Yes, I do.
If you want to provide that to people who might want to buy the books direct and get signed copies, I would, they could browse the river or other places, and they could email. They could feel free to email me and tell me, what books they wanted, and we'll as our old friend C.J. Henderson would say, we'll make some kind of deal. Just give me your credit card number and tell me how much to charge. I'll give you a good amount of books.
Yeah, I have J French Fam. Is that the right email?
jfrenchfam@aol.com.
And folks listening, I'm going to put a description for you as well.
Okay. Yeah. So, if Patrick's available to log on, I will gladly turn things over to him. Otherwise, I have a couple of flash fiction to read.
Oh boy, I haven't seen Pat yet.
No, it's not a flash. This is like short fiction.
Fair enough.
I think DC would appreciate me writing fiction about the Flash, given what I've said about him at certain conventions.
Okay, I just shot a message to Pat to see what's up, but I'm assuming he'll probably be with us soon.
Okay, well, he's not scheduled to 4:15.
This is true. Like I said earlier, it's kind of giving us a little bit of buffer time.
Yeah.
And I think that may have indicated his presence.
If I may, Patrick.
Hello.
Hello.
Let's see if I can see it.
Are you ready to go?
I could be. It's up to you.
Okay, well, let me read one more.
Time, I think.
Pardon?
I think
Yeah,
we're
you're a
still
little.
recording.
All
No,
right.
you're good. You're good.
Let me read a
You got
couple
time.
of flash fiction stories, and then Patrick, it's all yours.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, this one is the opening story from The Magic of Simon Tombs. And for all Simon fans, I hate to disappoint you, but he's not in this one. This is called Freely Chosen, and it's probably rated somewhere between PG and PG-13 for some imagery and some suggestions. Freely Chosen, a neighborhood fair. 110 has a sign, free henna tattoos and face painting. Inside is a cheerful young woman turning a young boy into a pirate. Behind her are examples of her work. For the kids, there are movie, comic, and cartoon characters. For teens and adults, she offers a selection of intricate geometric patterns. There is a line outside the tent. Is this really free? One mother asked. Yes, but offerings are always welcome. The young woman indicates a tip jar. Are these for kids? Are these only for kids? She shakes her head. No age limit. Any design on anyone. Anywhere you like. She looks toward a privacy screen in the back of the tent. Anywhere. The mother smiles. She comes back later and leaves with a surprise for her husband. Tips fill the jar. Business is good. Mostly kids in the morning, teens and adults later in the day. While some of these pick comic or movie art, most get a design on their face, on their arms, around their wrist. Some go behind the screen. The end of the day, the young woman is exhausted. Hard work, she thinks, but ultimately worth it. She folds her tent. Next week, same thing, different place. The face paint washes off. The henna-like dye seems to fade. Unless one took a photo, no trace seems to remain. Comes a certain night. A ritual is begun. Power invoked. Where the now forgotten tattoos were comes a sickly green glow. Some see it and worry and wonder. Some kids think it cool. Others sleep through it. The last are the lucky ones. In the morning after a certain night come the screams as the husk of teens, mothers, boyfriends, and children are discovered. In the morning after a certain night, as a city starts to panic, the young woman smiles. She has been and will be young for many, many years. Her youth and beauty renewed, her masters well fed by the sacrifice of those who chose the runes, offered their bodies, and willingly gave tribute. And that's it. I would like to, Pat was actually there when the idea for the story came to be. He and I were working a table at the Fairy Con, and across and to the left of us were two rather attractive young ladies in rather revealing Renaissance garb. I wasn't looking; Pat was, um, but and they did have intricate geometric designs in addition to the usual face painting things. And I said to Pat, I said, what if those weren't simply designs, but they were summoning runes? And he went, that's a good idea. And so we talked about what kind of mischief it would cause, and it was going to be a Bianca Jones story. And then some of the things that would have to be done, what Bianca or her husband Joe probably wouldn't do. So I needed a new magician. And eventually that magician became Simon Tombs. But that story basically was written as a flash fiction for another website, and I thought it was a good lead off to the magic of Simon Tombs.
I would agree.
Which is also available on Amazon as a trade paperback or in Kindle. But you would make Pad Wolf Publishing very happy if you went to their website and bought it direct from them. Right, Patrick? Patrick's gone.
Oops.
He'll be
The
back.
technical problems. Yeah. I'm assuming it's just more technical issues. It happens.
Okay. Well, while he's waiting, I've got one more story for you. It's a flash fiction, and hopefully I'll get it in before Big Ben chimes again. This is the start of my book, Last Redhead, which is a collection of my crime stories. It is published by Bold Venture Press, and again, you can get it from Amazon, other such sites, in trade paperback or in Kindle. But you would make Bold Venture Press very, very happy if you went to their site and bought both that and the Santa Heist and the Zorro collection. There, I enough commercials. Let's go to something wrong. Smith pulled up to the gas and go. It was a cold day. He left the Toyota unlocked with the motor running. When he came out holding his fourth cup of coffee of the day, his car was home. For a moment, he stood there nodding. Then, throwing the mostly full cup in the trash, he walked away. Fulton needed a ride. He wasn't choosy. Any ride would do. The local stop and robs were a good place to find one. And always some fool who thought it couldn't happen to him. Camry, no driver, smoke from the tailpipe. Looked good. He'd make a few stops, an out-of-town run, then dump it where the impound truck would tow it away. That white Toyota, Officer Lyle pointed it out to his partner. Taillights out. Flashers came on. Then the siren. Damn, thought as he pulled over. No sense running. Car chase with the cops only led to a wreck and a beating later. He wasn't worried. He was off probation. With the jail and courts crowded, he'd get no bail and a plea to unauthorized use, suspension and a fine. Almost as good as a walk. When the cop came up to the window, hand on his weapon, Fulton played innocent and stupid. Something wrong, officer? The cop's reply were interrupted by his partner. Lyle, back here. Bring the keys and the goof. The cop at the window held out his hand. Keys. Fulton handed them over, and then was partially marched, partly dragged to where the other cop was pointing to a dark fluid dripping from the trunk to the asphalt. I'll watch him. You pop it, said Lyle's partner. Even before the trunk opened, Fulton knew what was causing the leak. Looking down at the shot-dead body whose blood had pooled and was now escaping drop by drop, he didn't resist as the cop Lyle slapped on the cuff, saying, Yeah, I'd say there's something wrong. The arrest made the news. Smith watched smiling. Kill your mark. Put him in the trunk of his car. Break a taillight. Get it stolen. Get paid and wait for the next contract. Works every time. And that's a little bit of from the street stories. It never really happened when I was working as a crime scene investigator in that case, but we did find several bodies in several trunks.
I can only imagine.
Yes, one of them actually had been driven all the way down from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, although Pennsylvania to Baltimore is such a long drive.
Yeah, but Baltimore it's not like Baltimore.
John?
Yeah, I'm just waiting. Can you hear the chimes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, but Baltimore has enough of crime. I think it's kind of rude for the criminals out of state to bring us more.
You have a point.
If you're going to kill somebody in Pennsylvania, have the decency to leave him in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of open space there.
Or go to Jersey. Everything terrible is in Jersey.
I once was talking to a police detective from Atlantic County, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Their actual murder rate is higher than it should be because they are sort of midway between New York City and Atlantic City, which means people from both cities come, find a nice quiet spot in Atlantic County, and leave their bodies. And believe it or not, one of the very first police procedurals on that sort of thing is in the Bible. There's a part of the Bible that explains what to do when a body is found between cities. Mm-hmm. You have to measure the distance between the two cities, and you should first look in the closest city. A little bit of police investigation straight from the Bible. But then again, the Bible does have in Genesis is the first murder mystery. Unfortunately, there's only one suspect, and the detective is omniscient, so it wasn't much of a mystery.
I've never seen anyone put it that way, but you have an excellent point.
And I keep expecting. I would love to do it, but I'm too lazy to do all the necessary research. I would love to see somebody do a series of stories or novels about the prophet Daniel in Babylon. He did solve a couple a locked room mystery. I think I forget what some Bible expert will have to tell me what book it was in. But so he's the perfect hardboiled detective. He's in a strange land, he's working directly for the king. Everybody hates him. The Babylonians hate him because he's a Jew. The Jews hate him because he's working for the Babylonians. So I mean, he's the perfect detective. You get some good hard-boiled stories out of that. So if anybody there has a knowledge of the Bible and wants to write some hard-boiled detective fiction, there you go.
That's actually a good idea. I like that idea. Unfortunately, I got some knowledge of the Bible, but not enough, and I think you need to know more than a bit about Babylon as well.
Right, you need to read a couple books about what Babylon was like at the time. You'd have to see get some information on the king, on his court, and all that. And I'm sure there's some excellent books out there. But
no doubt.
Once you do the initial research, you can probably just start writing your stories. But it's that initial research I'm too lazy to do.
We've got a question for you from the chat, actually.
Okay.
Teresa Hall, Gulf City Pagan, who's a regular listener of mine, wants to know the strangest place you've found a body.
That is a good question. I'll put it this way. I didn't actually find it, but it wasn't my case. But and for those of you who are young or have a delicate stomach or all that, please turn away now before it's too late. A man was found in a dumpster. Now that in and of itself was not unusual. However, the dumpster was the dumpster from which basically the trash in that dumpster came from the garbage chute of a high-rise apartment. The bottom of the chute ended in a trash compactor. You get the rest of the story.
Yeah.
The dialogue there, which I stole for one of my stories, was as he's being removed, one police officer asked the other, "Was this guy married?" And the second officer said, "No, separated." Think about it.
Okay, then.
Yeah, but we once got a call Friday night, full moon shining, 10 o'clock at night. Our first call was for a body discovered in a cemetery. Not unusual. There's lots of bodies in cemeteries, but
usually.
What happened was the gravedigger that afternoon was assigned to dig a grave for shall we say, a new arrival. So he dug where he was supposed to, saw that there was a body already in the grave, covered it over, moved on to the next site, and dug that one. Then he started thinking, that body shouldn't have been there. I should tell somebody. So he did, and 10 o'clock at night, I'm on a body dig in a cemetery trying to find what the deal was. Well, fortunately, it all turned out that they simply lost the record of this person. But there's nothing like, standing by while somebody digs up a dead body in the middle of a rather small cemetery with a full moon shining down on you.
Oh, I can imagine. I've spent a lot of time in cemeteries. I've never been around for a body being dug up, thank God.
So are there any other questions from the chat?
Anybody else?
Talk until Pat Thomas shows up.
Or yeah, he unmutes. I think he may have just turned off his camera and muted so he didn't interrupt. I'll also point out, of course, I don't know what your schedule is like, but you're more than welcome to join us for the free-for-all later tonight around 8:15.
I'll see if I can go. And then there's the tomorrow
vampire
night.
panel.
There's the vampire panel at
Yep.
what time?
5
5
o'clock.
o'clock.
hmm
Okay. Well, I've written a few vampire stories.
Yep, some good ones too.
Yeah, thank you. Again, the first one was actually written for a Zarnak collection. It was one of the first stories I ever wrote professionally. And as always, C.J. Henderson got me involved with this. And Zarnak was a detective, supernatural detective created by August Derleth, who wrote it as the part of Lovecraft's mythos. And his adventures were continued by C.J. Henderson. And somebody was putting together a Zarnak anthology, and CJ recommended me. And I was the only one there who did not turn in a mythos story. Mine was straight vampire with, I think, a rather unique. It got converted into a Bianca Jones story in Blood Is the Life, so you know what the solution. I think you should know what the solution is.
I think so. I've read the book. It's been a while.
Yeah, but anyway, I think it's a rather unique way of killing a vampire. And if you want to know what that unique way is, go to look for John L. French, Blood Is the Life, published by found in Amazon, and again from our friends at Bold Venture Press.
I definitely recommend that one. Actually, in point of fact, I'm proud to say that there isn't a book of yours or Patrick's that I've read that I wouldn't recommend. All of your stuff is great. You're welcome. Speaking of the devil, I'm wondering if let's see. Should I maybe send him a poke him on Facebook and see if he's paying attention? Not that I dislike having you here, but it's like I do want to make sure everybody gets their time.
Yes, definitely. I'm sure people are tired of listening to me, or maybe they're not. Meanwhile, while we're waiting, if there's anybody else in the chat room who would want some questions, either about what I write or why I write it, or why they haven't come to take me away.
Oh.
Ha! Ooh. Funny fire in my life. It's beautiful. Or anything about the crime scene. I do not answer questions about where can I hide a body, because I'm never quite sure if they're asking for a story or whether they have something in their basement they want to get rid of.
Okay, John or Patrick is in fact still here. It's like I said, he seems. Yeah, Pat, you're marked as muted and your camera's turned off, so you should be able to turn those back on, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, bear with us, folks. I'm in communication with Patrick at the moment. We're getting this straightened out. I swear. Okay, so yeah, he's going to sign out and back in. While he does that, I think I'm going to stop the stream so I can prep the next Patrick, so we can keep the separate videos. folks,
Okay.
just bear with us. This stream's gonna end in a minute. There'll be a new one within the next
Okay.
2 or 3
Well, with
minutes.
that, I'll say adieu. I might, if
Yep.
possible, I'll join in at 8 o'clock. If not, I'll see you at the panel at 5. 5
Yep.
o'clock, is it?
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
I'll see you at the panel, 5 o'clock.
Okay. See you then, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye.